shots of regular seasonal vaccine and 2 shots of swine vaccine, starting at 6 months of age, went through the maximum amount of damage as far as the mercury. And they know about it because we have their study. It's called the Southwood Study. It was actually a report. It was a meeting that was held in the year 2000 when the people from the CDC and the World Health Organization, the vaccine manufacturers, got together at a place called Simpsonwood. It's the Simpsonwood report. And they said, the mercury does produce the autism that destroy the lives of children, and our children are not going to get it. But how are we going to keep the public from knowing? Because if they knew this, they wouldn't take our vaccine. So we know that they know what they're doing. And they destroyed the lives of our children. Between 1 in 60 and 1 in 90 American boys is now autistic, and their lives are destroyed, and they know what they're doing. But Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are funding the vaccine programs in Africa, and we left the mercury in the vaccines we're giving to the African children. Now, that not only destroy their minds, they destroy their fertility. And the fertility is destroyed in this generation and in subsequent generations. And it is not just this generation they destroy fertility, but, in their children and their children's children. One of the most vicious and horrible things that has ever been done and is being done by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would they do that? First of all, why would people who are dedicated to population control want to save the lives of little African children? And they don't want to save their lives. They want to destroy them.
Yeah, that's 1 plus 1 equals 100. It doesn't make sense. In fact, put that article back up. Secret meeting with the Rockefellers, the Gateses, Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, who calls us useless eaters and feeders, billionaire club in bid to curb overpopulation. And they said a secret meeting of how to carry this out. Go ahead.
Well, and don't forget George Soros was there. But
yes.
Basically, you have to try to say, why would rational people do this? Well, these are not rational people. There are people who've gone over to the dark side. And basically, there is an organization in the United States. They have a newsletter. They have offices in New York City, in Geneva, in London. They're very well funded. Some of the richest people in the world fund them. And, of course, they're called the Lucis Trust.
Tell us about Lucis Trust and phone calls straight ahead.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
How could you talk about anything else? We have a global government being set up openly for the stated purpose of exterminating us. They're testing different poisons and toxins in the food and vaccines. They're bragging about it. And the general public still only cares about football, and is it racist to criticize Obama when he's just a black face on their killing machine? I mean, I almost broke down and cried. A week and a half ago, my kids are playing out in the front yard, in the neighbor's yard, and 2 different groups of neighborhood kids out of 4 groups. 4 different groups of kids from different parents in the neighborhood. I know all their parents were coming up showing me their flu shot bandages on their arms. And these are sweet little, smart little kids. And I've known them for about a year and a half as we live in this neighborhood. And I don't know if it was placebo mentally or whatever, but they seemed like dumbed down and kind of, look at where I got a shot. And one of them was kind of like he was drunk. And maybe it was something else that was making him act like that. But then they're over at my house playing in the backyard, and one of their mothers calls and says, tell her son's name to come home in 20 minutes for dinner. And she goes, I go, how are you doing? How you been doing? To the lady 3 doors down. And she goes, oh, I'm good. I just got both my kids' flu shots today. And I just didn't even say anything to her. I know I was supposed to, but she was so proud of herself. And once a mother's hurt their child, it's like a woman. Once she's had an abortion, she rarely wants to say it was wrong. They get into it. Oh, it was right. It was good. It wasn't a human. But Dr. Monteith, and we're going to take some calls, what do you call that psychology, and then get into the Lucis Trust, where once they've done something wrong or been wrong, they can never admit they're wrong?
Well, you call it denial is the term. But the truth of the matter is, Alex, it is so hard to believe that the doctor who you know and you trust would give something to your child that would be harmful to them. But what you must understand, I don't know if you've ever seen the DVD or heard the talk put out by Dr. Blaylock, and I know you don't know Russell, but he has a talk on vaccines and brain development, pointing out that the vaccines actually stunt brain development. The younger they're given, why, of course, the younger the child is, the more damage they do. But every time you take a vaccine, why, it triggers off not only the immune response in the body, but the immune response in the brain. And that's why those children were a little groggy. They weren't quite themselves. You know, they weren't thinking clearly. Well, when you get the flu, you know, your mind is sort of groggy. But, of course, the same thing happens when you take the vaccine. But you do this repeatedly, and you produce chronic inflammation in the brain of an older person, and that's why so many of them get demented. But you do this in the child, it prevents the normal development of the brain in the child. This is criminal activity, and they want to give several of these vaccine shots at the same time, knowing that it will do the maximum amount of damage that way. The average doctor has no idea because he's never allowed to hear this information. That's why we need to educate your audience. They've got to
they're compartmentalized. We need to educate our city councils, our health departments, our police, our doctors. Most of them, they don't know.
But I think that an awful lot of people at least have a suspicion something's going on, and I think there's a growing awareness that there's something seriously wrong. And they have to understand that it is not simply the mercury in the vaccines, although this is toxic to the brain. It is the aluminum that is in the vaccines. Now, fortunately, as far as we know, they are not going to have aluminum in the swine flu vaccine, but it is in the regular seasonal vaccine. And this, of course, aluminum is a toxic metal, and aluminum and mercury together are even more toxic. And then if you have fluoridated water, that's the 1, 2, 3 thing. And this is why so many of even our college students, when they graduate, are totally incapable when they graduate from college.
They can't think. I mean, this is what the globalists call for in their documents, is brain damaging everybody through the food, water, and vaccines. And so people say it's like the public's retarded. They are. And Dr. Blaylock points that out, that they have major studies that people that are 20 now on average have the memory of a 65-year-old. And literally, they're just going to turn it into a business, advertise it, and say it's normal to have an 80 IQ, it's normal to drool. Geniuses won't have 140 IQ, they'll have 100. And if somebody can tie their shoelaces, they'll be a genius. And then the elite's just laughing. And I know there's brain damaged people listening right now, but even with a retarded child, you can get through to them and talk to them. To the police officers, you've been brain damaged. You've been brainwashed. The sodium fluoride isn't good for you. The vaccines aren't good. Bad man giving you shot. Bad system hurt your brain. Brain is what you think with. It's in your... I'm not being sarcastic here. Sometimes I think I should talk to the general public like that because Look, I want to take a few final calls here with you, Dr. Monteith, but one last question before we take a few of those. Quickly, the time we have left here, because I've got other news for listeners I'm going to hit. We appreciate your time. I had Dr. Blaylock on several times in the last month, and he pointed out that mercury, aluminum, not just squalene, are adjuvants themselves and cause the autoimmune response and swelling, not just in the brain, but in other glands and organs. And that's where most of the damage is coming from, not just the cancer viruses, not just the neurological damage of the mercury itself. What's your intel on that as a medical doctor?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. And remember what Bertrand Russell said in his book on page 53, The Impact of Science on Society. By diet, injections, and injunctions will alter the brain patterns of our children. That's exactly what it was about. He was one of the elitists. He laid it all out. But we can't let the people know there really are evil people who want to harm their children.
All right, let's take a call. I'm going to go to your calls quickly now. Chris in Maryland, you're on the air with Dr. Stan Monteith. Go ahead.
Hey, doctor. It's an honor to talk to you. I was a combat lifesaver in the Army years ago, and one of the things that we were taught is to give vaccines for the flu. And during the course, the instructor had said, now these actual flu vaccines are from last year's strain. And I questioned him and I asked, why are we getting last year's strain? Because of, if it's this year that we're living in, what good is last year's strain going to be? And it makes sense now with all these nanoparticles, these adjuvants such as mercury, the other stuff.
Yeah, you're not given the shot to take care of the flu. You're giving it to be brain damaged.
Exactly. And now I understand why I've got these medical disabilities such as IBS and autoimmune system infection where it's attacking my own body.
Sure.
It makes perfect sense.
Were you in during the Gulf War, during the first Gulf War?